Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday, and I hope you've got some lovely things planned for your weekend. I'm doing a brief chat today on addiction and what addiction really is. I think addiction's such a hard concept to understand if you've not been an addict. And bear in mind, addiction can be anything: drink, drugs, sex, gambling, spending, whatever it might be, fast cars. It's when really we have an overindulgence towards something that we need a lot of, like out of the realms of normality, and a lot of our happiness is hinged on that, or a lot of our anxiety is hinged on if I have that addictive quality and give into it and indulge it, therefore I'm going to feel better in that moment. It's only ever temporary. The problem with addiction is that it usually is hiding a tremendous amount of suffering and struggle and an inability to be present and grounded in your body in the moment, a struggle to handle stress, overwhelm, all of these things, because what addiction does is it takes away the discomfort and gives you some form of happy feeling to a greater or lesser degree. But the thing is, addiction, whatever you're doing, you're using, you're acting on, impulsiveness, it has a shelf life. It's only temporary. So it lasts as long as it lasts, until your next fix, your next hit, your next spend. And with addiction, the problem is, although we're kind of running for that feel-good factor, it's marked by destructive behaviour. So it might be self-harm. If you're using drink or drugs, you're harming your body. You're harming your spiritual system, you're harming everything. If you're spending recklessly, obviously that comes with issues. So addiction is a massive problem. My background is addiction, and I've really come up against, in society, with values, people that if they haven't had addiction can be very judgmental. Now that's a very grand statement. I'm not saying everybody who hasn't had addiction just assumes, many things about addicts, but there has been a general theme, and I think addiction is such a hard thing, to be fair, to understand if you've not been an addict, because from the outside world it might look like, why would that person do that to themselves? Why would they put themselves in such chaotic situations that are going to have a massive boomerang effect that's going to come back and smack them in the face at a later date? I say with addiction, nobody chooses to be an addict, and this is the thing. This is what I've witnessed a lot of, or tried to support people to understand more. Nobody chooses addiction. I'm not even going to say addiction chooses the person, because it's all about actually taking responsibility, isn't it? Some people are more likely to be addicts physically, if there's addiction in the family, nurture, environments, genetics. Some people are going to be more inclined. Also, if they've been brought up in a family where there's addiction, that child has been taught that this is how you handle life, this is how you handle stress, this is how you handle uncomfortable feelings. I've also met many people who've been around a lot of addiction and won't touch anything with a barge pole. That's great. But I think for addicts, it's to understand that these people are struggling. They're in so much pain. They're in so much turmoil that, they don't see any way out for the period of time that they're in their addiction. They don't see light at the end of the tunnel. They don't believe it can happen for them, or their pain is too great, or that craving. Never underestimate the power of a craving. It's so incredible. It's swamping their whole day, their thought, their every experience, until they get that fix. I mean, what is that like to live with? So much stigma around addiction, and it's really sad, because there are numerous addicts out there, ones who admit, ones in denial, ones who aren't even aware that they're using addictive behaviours and they don't even realise. It doesn't even have to be a substance. It can be a behaviour that is very toxic. When we talk about people using substances in their body to alter their mindset, I think it's terribly sad, because it's like indirect suicide. So I've often heard people say, well, they should never have started in the first place. And I'll often think, if you actually understood their background, you'd probably be using as well. Okay, so it's recognising that these people, they're in so much turmoil and pain. And what can we do to support that? I think the worst thing we can do is judge. The worst thing we can do is be angry. But that's So hard if you love an addict, if your family's an addict, if your friend's an addict, if you're working with an addict, because obviously addiction has a knock-on effect on others around. It's a messy situation, but it's understanding that addiction is rife, particularly with the world we live in now. It's a hard planet to live on. It's ways of managing stress. It's often a lot of people's childhoods as well. There's so much trauma, they just don't know how to cope with it. So I just think if you know an addict, maybe just give them a kind word, maybe just check in with them. We're not really here to tell addicts to stop, because they're never going to stop until they're ready. You just got to pray that one day they will be ready. It's what can be put in place for them, what support do they need that they're missing, what's going on for them. They're human beings, and you know, they can come out the other side, but they're never going to unless they decide it for themselves. It's so complex, and it's so painful for people around an addict to watch that person harming themselves. But it just takes such a level of understanding of what is actually going on a much deeper level. What's going on in their soul, what's going on in their hearts, what's going on in their mind, what's their triggers. They deserve this support. So I just wanted to put something out there about addiction. I just hear about it so often. You know, there's so much judgment still in this day and age that they simply shouldn't have done it in the first place, or they've brought it on themselves, or what did they expect? And I think if we can just afford for just 2 minutes to look past that as to actually what happened to lead them to a life where their self-care is just out the window, their self-love, their self-worth, their confidence, probably zero. Maybe it was never there in the first place, and maybe that addiction gives them that in that moment, and that addiction will work for them. It will work for them. It will sustain them on some level until it becomes a real problem. You know, it might be that it keeps them functioning. They get up in the morning, they can face the world, they can face their job, they can face people, they can face their demons a little bit more whilst using whatever it is, until it becomes a real problem, and then it backfires, and that coping, helping mechanism is no longer helping, it's destroying them. Nobody chooses to be an addict. I think that's my point. Have a lovely weekend.